The Superstitious Man's Story by Thomas Hardy. There was something very strange about William's death, very strange indeed, sighed a melancholy man in the back of the van. It was the seedsman's father, who had hitherto kept silent. And what might that have been? Asked Mr. Lackland. William, as you may know, was a curious silent man. You could feel when he came near you, and when he was in the house or anywhere behind you, without your seeing him, there seemed to be something clammy in the air, as if a cellar door opened close by your elbow. Well, one Sunday, at a time that William was in very good health, to all appearances, the bell that was ringing for the church went very heavy, all of a sudden. The sexton who told me aught said he had not known the bell to go so heavy in his hand for years. It was as if the gudgeons wanted oiling. That was on Sunday, as I say. During the week after, it chanced that William's wife was staying up late one night to finish her ironing. She was doing the washing for Mr. and Mrs. Harcombe. Her husband had finished his supper and gone to bed as usual some hour or two before. While she ironed, she heard him coming downstairs. He stopped to put on his boots at the stair foot, where he always left them, and then came into the living room where she was ironing, passing through it towards the door, this being the only way from the staircase to the outside of the house. No word was said on either side, William not being a man given to much speaking, and his wife being occupied with her work. He went out and closed the door behind him. As her husband had now and then gone out in his way at night, before when unwell or unable to sleep for want of a pipe, she took no particular notice and continued at her ironing. This she finished shortly after, and as he had not come in, she waited a while for him, putting away the ironings and things, and preparing the table for his breakfast in the morning. Still he did not return, but supposing him not far off, and wanting to go to bed herself, tired as she was, she left the door unbarred and went to the stairs, after writing on the back of the door with chalk, "Mind and do the door," because he was a forgetful man. To her great surprise, and I say alarm, on reaching the foot of the stairs, his boots were standing there as they always stood when he had gone to rest. Going up to their chamber, she found him in bed, sleeping as sound as a rock. How he could have got back without her seeing or hearing him was beyond her comprehension. It could only have been by passing behind her very quietly while she was bumping with the iron. But this notion did not satisfy her. It was surely impossible that she should not have seen him come in through a room so small. She could not unravel the mystery, and felt very queer and uncomfortable about it. However, she would not disturb him to question him then, and went to bed herself. He rose and left for his work very early the next morning, before she was awake, and she awaited his return to breakfast with much anxiety for an explanation, for thinking the matter over by daylight made it seem only more startling. When he came in to the meal, he said, before she could put her question, "What's the meaning of them words chalked on the door?" She told him, and asked him about his going out the night before. William declared that he had never left the bedroom after entering it, having in fact undressed, lay down, and fallen asleep directly, never once waking till the clock struck 5, and he rose up to go to his labor. Betty Privet was as certain in her own mind that he did not go out as she was of her own existence, and was a little less certain that he did not return. She felt too disturbed to argue with him, and let the subject drop, as though she must have been mistaken. When she was walking down Longpuddle Street later in the day, she met Jim Weedle's daughter Nancy, and said, "Well, Nancy, you do look sleepy today." "Yes, Mrs. Privet," said Nancy. "Now don't tell anybody, but I don't mind letting you know what the reason of it is. Last night, being Old Midsummer Eve, some of us church porch, and didn't get home till near 1. "Did ye?" asked Mrs. Privet. "Old Midsummer yesterday, was it? Faith, I didn't think where 'twas Midsummer or Michaelmas. I've too much work to do." "Yes, and we were frightened enough, I can tell 'ee, by what we saw." "What did ye see?" "You may not remember, sir, having gone off to foreign parts so young, that on Midsummer night it is believed whereabouts that the faint shapes of all the folk in the parish who are going to be at death's door within the year can be seen entering the church. Those who get over their illness come out again after a while. Those that are doomed to die do not return." "What did you see?" asked William's wife. "Well," says Nancy backwardly, "we needn't tell what we saw or who we saw." "You saw my husband," said Betty Privet in a quiet way. "Well, since you put it so," says Nancy, hanging fire, "we thought we did see him, but it was darkish, and we was frightened, and of course it might not have been he. Nancy, you needn't mind letting it out, though 'tis kept back in kindness. He didn't come out of the church again. I know it as well as you." Nancy did not answer yes or no to that, and no more was said. But 3 days after, William Privet was mowing with John Childs in Mr. Harcombe's meadow, and in the heat of the day they sat down to their bit of lunch under a tree and emptied their flagon. Afterward, both of them fell asleep as they sat. John Childs was first to awake, and as he looked toward his fellow mower, he saw one of those great white miller souls, as we call them, that is to say, a miller moth, come from William's open mouth while he slept, and fly straight away. John thought it odd enough, as William had worked in the mill for several years when he was a boy. He then looked at his son, and found by the place of it that they had slept a long while, and, as William did not wake, John called to him and said it was high time to begin work again. He took no notice, and then John went up and shook him and found he was dead. Now on that very day old Philip Hookhorn was down at Long Puddle Spring, dipping up a pitcher of water, and as he turned away, who should he see coming down to the spring on the other side but William, looking very pale and old? This surprised Philip Hookhorn very much, for years before that time William's little son, his only child, had been drowned in that spring while at play there, and this had so preyed upon William's mind that he had never been seen near the spring afterwards, and had been known to go half a mile out of his way to avoid the place. On inquiry, it was found that William and Body could not have stood by the spring, being in the mead 2 miles off, and it also came out that the time at which he was seen at the spring was the very time when he had died. "A rather melancholy story," observed the emigrant, after a moment's silence. "Yes, yes. Well, we must take ups and downs together," said the seedsman's father. The end of the superstitious man's story.